Joining us now to give us some update from Bloomfield Township is Captain Dan Edwards. Captain Edwards, good morning and welcome back to what is a very busy day here in the MegaCast. Good to have you with us.
Good morning, Dave. Good to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to our communities.
Well, it's great to talk to you. Just speak up as much as you can because we're having a little difficulty. Maybe get a little closer to your computer. It's greatly appreciated. So the West Bloomfield Police Department has already come out and said that they had conversations yesterday with those folks that are holding a protest beginning today around noon at Maple and Orchard Lake. Have you heard in your department from any other activities that are planned around the county that you're comfortable talking about?
Well, we don't have any protests in our community right now, but we've assisted several neighbors with their protests, and there's a lot of them around the areas. Yes.
Yeah, it seems to be a growing grassroots activity that seems to be happening not only in our major downtowns, but happening everywhere. And a lot of these things have been really beautiful, like the protests that happened yesterday or the day before over in Grosse Pointe, where there are a bunch of 6 to 12-year-old kids, out, and they're seeing all this on TV, and they're the future of our country. They wanted to get out and say their word, too. So there's been that. There's been a lot of peace and a lot of love and a lot of people relieving their anger to some extent and sharing their feelings and thoughts in a very productive way. Any thoughts?
There is a lot of anger about this whole incident, and it's within our police department also. Our officers were anxious and worried about the whole COVID thing for the last couple months. And now when this video came out and they watched this video, I think our officers within our department had the same reaction that everybody did. They were just angered and outraged at what they saw in the video. And we put out a statement earlier this week that spoke to that exact fact, that it's angering and frustrating for us to see the callous disregard for somebody's life. And it's especially because the person who did it was wearing a uniform. And it angers us more so or as much as it does the residents.
Well, it's that one bad apple thing, and we all know that one bad apple can definitely have an impact on an entire industry and clearly an entire country. But I think a lot of people protesting right now would say it's a little bit more than one bad apple. And so the country now is going through something that we have not gone through to this degree, and it's impacting us here in West Bloomfield and Bloomfield Township and Troy and Oakland County yesterday and all of our communities. And, is it difficult for police officers when they're on their daily beat doing their daily duties to protect the community, to deal with questions and interact with people right now, or do people just want to come up to police officers and talk to them about these matters?
I think there's a lot of anger towards police right now. There's no doubt about it. And the officers have said it, on traffic stops and just being out in the community. They've felt the frustration of people, which is why we put our statement out that we stand with the protesters. We get it. There's issues that need to be addressed, and we're hearing what in the International Association of Chiefs of Police also put out a statement that we kind of mirrored with that we recognize that there are issues, and the protesters talk about use of force incidents, bias in policing, and officers' accountability and transparency. Those are the three main things that we keep hearing in the protests, and that's the key to police community relations, is having a trust, especially in those areas. So we recognize that we need to work with the community and come to some realistic solutions that take into account what law enforcement is all about, but also take into account their concerns and come up with some solutions that work towards having us relate with our community better.
Captain Dan Edwards, Bloomfield Township Police Department, is with us. I don't think I would go down this road with you, except that I really appreciate you coming on the show again today and your comments when you were with us last time. I thought they were so on target. So as I think back here in Metro Detroit, and I think back to I'm old enough to remember the riots of the 60s and the challenges we had in the 60s with a largely African-American Detroit and a largely white police department at that time in the city of Detroit, and certainly a lot of turmoil. And here we are in 2020 still dealing with the things. But the thing that just came to mind that I want to ask you about, you're operating a police department in suburban Detroit in one of the most affluent communities in the area with a primarily white community, not exclusively, but a primarily white community here in our urban area of Metro Detroit. Does that add some extra responsibility and extra challenges given what we're going through right now, or is that just, it doesn't really matter?
We absolutely have to be a reflection of our community. Every law enforcement agency has to do that. And we have to be concerned about the concerns of our communities and responsive to that. And I think it's important in law enforcement that whether it's with protests or whether it's with these issues that are being brought up, that we need to work with the community and community leaders. And that's one of the challenges with these protests, that I hope the people that are angry and frustrated and they're willing to spend their personal time to go out and protest and talk about their frustrations, that once these frustrations die down, that they're willing to be part of the solution and that they're willing to come in and talk to us about the issues and help us come up with solutions that can help us to be more transparent and to help us to be unbiased in our use of force incidents, to be more open and trusting for the community, because we have a job to do to enforce the laws and to keep the community safe, but we have to do that hand in hand with the community. It shouldn't be an us versus them. It has to be, we're in this together, and we have to do what the community wants.
Well, and I think you just said it all. It can't be an us versus them. It's got to be an us, because we are us, really. The police department are also part of the community. So I think that's what we're getting through here now, and that's part of what we have to work through, and clearly we have to work a little bit harder. The last couple of days I've seen a lot of reports in the media with organizations suggesting that we minimize the policing in our country. We defund police departments. We have less policing. I imagine you've got some thought on that issue, Captain Dan Edwards, Bloomfield Township Police Department.
Again, it's like we work for our communities, and it's the community's choice as to what level of police they want. And, the community works with elected officials, and they decide what level of policing they want. And, through funding, they get to make those choices, and through political pressure on the elected officials to say, we need to put more effort in this area or less effort in this area. And we make some of those decisions, but we have to work with the community and work with our elected officials. And I have a really good example with that, with these riots that are going, or the protests that are going on. The way a protest is supposed to be handled right from the beginning, and 99% of the time that's how it happens. When we get word through our secret methods of that there's going to be a protest in our community, we reach out to the protesters and have them come in and talk with us. And we try to bring the business owners who the protester, it's going to be in this area, the stakeholders in that community should have some input also, and the elected officials. So the 4 different groups sit down and just have a conversation. And we talk about what the goals of the protesters are and what the needs of the communities is, and get some input from the elected officials. And with these 4 different groups having a conversation, we try to set up some sort of guidelines as to what meets the needs of the protesters and what meets the needs of the community. And then after that meeting, we set up rules that, okay, the protesters shouldn't go in this area because, it's too likely that one person will start damaging property, or people could get injured. So we put a line to try to keep them going in the direction that we've all kind of agreed on from the beginning. And it's not, and the news media likes to focus on that attention, that 3-second clip where the protesters meet the line of police officers, but they miss the big picture part, that the reason that line is there is because that's what the community wants, and that's what the elected officials want, and that's what the protesters agreed was reasonable from the beginning. And so we have to enforce the rules, but it has to be the community and the the politicians that help us make those rules and draw that line. And obviously, we have to make split-second decisions with, things change and, they go different directions, and we have to make on-the-fly decisions, whether to use gas or, escalate our force to keep people from damaging property.
Well, from the rule-changing modification department, a little bit of thought coming out of the legislature yesterday. We'll ask you this, and then we'll let you get on with your day, because I know you're busy, Captain Dan Edwards of the Bloomfield Township Police Department. But the Michigan Senate passed a new bill yesterday, not law, just passed by the Senate, that establishes mandatory training for incoming law enforcement officers on implicit bias, de-escalation techniques, and mental health screening. Will that really represent a change, or are a lot of those strategies already included in the training that your officers and others receive?
Implicit bias and those things have been included in our training for years, and use of force in our screenings of our background is included. And we have policies on it, and we train on it, and it's important to have oversight. And like I said, it's important to have community input and elected officials' input on it. We can always improve in those areas, but we do have policies and we do train on it, and It is part of our culture. But there are people that break those policies.
I would expect that, and maybe it happens in your department. It doesn't happen in every other little small department across the state of Michigan. So we'll keep an eye on that and let our listeners know. Captain Dan Edwards, not an easy day. One of these days we're going to get together and talk about something a little bit lighter and easier to deal with. But I appreciate you so much taking time to come out during these difficult times and share your thoughts and make sure that people know the Bloomfield Township Police Department is listening, and what we hear from you is the same similar story that we're hearing from our fine law enforcement leaders across our area. So thank you for your time today. Any final comments or anything else you want to share with the community today?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on here and to help to humanize law enforcement, help to educate the community about what we are about, that we're all in this together, and that we stand with the protesters and we understand their rage about this incident, and that we want to make sure nothing like this happens again in the future just as much as they do.
I got it. Thank you, Captain Dan Edwards.